What's going on, Audioholics? Tyler here from Audioholics Anonymous, and today I bring to you my review of the new Leprous album, Aphelion. So, Leprous is a band that's pretty important to me. I got into them around the time they put out the first single for Pitfalls, which I believe was Below. I had listened to Melina, and a lot of that album just really stuck with me. I really love Stuck, the song. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's gotten me through a lot of hard decisions in my life, and it's my go-to whenever I'm doubting myself, whenever I feel like I'm stuck on mountains and I don't know where to go. A lot of the lyrics in those albums really stick with me. Below is one of my favorite songs ever. I relate to that song a lot, and I absolutely love the melodies. Leprous are one of my favorite bands because they are just masters in their craft. They have absolutely amazingly emotional and heartfelt melodies and lyrics and just great songwriting. I love them. So I was pretty much looking forward to this album a lot. You know, this might have been my most anticipated album of the year. And I gotta admit, I'm a little bit disappointed. Don't take that the wrong way. This review is probably going to have a little bit more of a negative feel to it because I am a little bit disappointed by this album, but it's still a really, really good album, okay? It's still a really good album. I still think you should check it out. I still think it's going to end up on my end of the year list, so don't get me wrong, I really like this thing. I'm just going to explain why it disappointed me a bit as a Leprous fan and how I think the other albums might have been a little bit better. So let's start off with the vocals. I have no complaints here. You know, Leprous always knock it out of the ballpark with vocals. They are absolutely amazing. Einar is one of my favorite singers, and this is one of his best performances, probably. He is absolutely amazing on this record. He sounds great. It feels like he's really using his voice in different ways. He has much wider range, it feels like, at least, than on some previous albums. I absolutely enjoy his performance. I would give this section a 10 out of 10. I have no complaints here. So, the parts of the album where I have complaints are pretty much everything else. Starting off with the instrumentals. Now, something people complained about with Pitfalls that I personally don't agree with is that it felt like an Einar solo career. I can understand the complaint. I feel like the instrumentals existed to serve the music in that album. They weren't really up front and center, but everything they did served the composition. Not necessarily the vocals. The vocals and the instrumentals worked together to serve the composition. It just so happened that the composition focused more on the vocals. Does that make sense? I don't feel that's the case in this new album. I think that a lot of people were hoping the instrumentals would be more prominent than in Pitfalls, and I think that is true, but nonetheless, the instrumentals very obviously exist to serve the vocals, not the composition. And I think that that's a pretty big issue with the album, but nonetheless, they never annoyed me. They never took me out of the music. It never felt narcissistic or anything like that. So I'm not going to dock too many points for this, but there really are no moments in this album that I would say that is standout instrumentally. Maybe except for, like, a part in Castaway Angels, this, like, bridge section. The rest of the album, I don't know. It didn't impress me. I'd give the instrumentals a 7.5 out of 10. They do what they're supposed to. They're perfectly fine, good execution, but they just left something to be desired, which is going to be a running theme with this album. So for the composition and songwriting, I'll get this right out of the way. It's an 8 out of 10. And that's because it's still a Leprous album. So the songwriting is still up to a certain level of quality. These guys are great songwriters and musicians, and they know what they're doing. Nonetheless, the reason I dock 2 points is because I feel that this album just isn't as memorable as the other Leprous albums I've heard. I know that it's still new, but I've heard it 4 or 5 times, and there's only a short few songs that I would really say stand out enough that I would go out of my way to listen to them again. Out of Here is one of them. That's a phenomenal song. Silent Revelation was the second single, and I've loved it since I first heard it. Castaway Angels is the best song on the album, hands down in my opinion, although it came out before the album was even announced, before the first single, Running Low, was put out. Castaway Angels was released to the public, and I've adored it since the first listen. I think it has one of the best Leprous choruses ever. Nighttime Disguise, I've heard, is a song that was helped written by the fans, which is pretty interesting and cool if true. I really like the return of harsh vocals in the end of the song, and I think the rest of the song is really amazing too. Outside of that, Silhouette, it's okay. All the Moments has a really nostalgic sound, but again, it's just, it's alright. Have You Ever, Shadow Side, that's a pretty good song. I wouldn't say it's a standout, but it's pretty good. On Hold, I could pretty much take or leave. I wouldn't say there are any absolute filler moments on the album, but a lot of these songs just aren't that memorable compared to stuff like Below or Stuck or like anything from those albums. So, again, 8 out of 10 on the songwriting. I just feel like there's a certain level of memorability that's missing. There's a certain level of catchiness that's missing, a certain level of oomph. And I just think there's something missing here. It really feels like this album, and I feel like this shouldn't be understated. This album is unique. It has a very unique sound, and it's definitely an evolution of the Leprous sound. And it's something that can be commended, that they can continually improve and evolve their sound like this, but this really feels like a tiptoe into the deep end of this new sound. It doesn't really feel like they've perfected it yet. It doesn't really feel like they've really embraced it yet. And so there's a certain level of lack of polish here. I think that if they were to continue this sound in the next album, it'll probably be way better, since they have this album as experience to go off of. But as it stands, again, there's just something missing here for me. There's something that just doesn't feel right, and it's just not clicking with me. So about personal enjoyment, I would say 8.5 out of 10. It's not a great masterpiece or anything, but it's really good, and it's probably going to end up on my end of the year list. I enjoy it a lot, and I'll admit the more I listen to it, the more it grows on me. But I gotta dock at least 1.5 off, because again, I am a mite disappointed by what we got. It's really just not clicking with me as much as their past material. And you know what? That's okay. It's still a good album. I'm glad we got it. Good work, guys. And the final score for this album is going to be an 8.5 out of 10. So did you guys listen to Aphelion? Did you guys enjoy it? Maybe it clicked for you more than it did for me, and if so, hey, that's great. I'd like to hear your opinions in the comments section below. But without further ado, I bid you adieu. Bye-bye.